We have a very large level 4 moderate risk ahead of portions of the Midwest later today, as we're looking at for a detrimental MCS/Derecho likely to bring in some very strong hurricane force wind, as well. We do an area of 10% for tornadoes, so be careful with the possibility for some surface-based supercells, and as well we are looking at for some pretty significant hail. So today is a pretty large overall threat for severe weather with the 3 side effects: tornadoes, winds, and as well overall hail. So we have a lot to talk about for portions of the Michigan and Minnesota region specifically, and as well even stretching out towards Illinois and Michigan. But we're looking at overall the all conditions for today's event and see how significant it can be, as well looking at the overall outbreak region and as well timing for this event. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So here's a latest look here at the update on the SPC for day 1, and we have a very large moderate risk here ahead of portion of Wisconsin and just to the very south of the Minnesota border, but really watching out specifically for Wisconsin, specifically watching out for Wisconsin to be the main area of the hardest hit winds from the Derecho, but as well as enhanced risk is now all the way down to Michigan and as well into far northern Indiana, and as well not too far from Chicago. I believe Chicago is basically right on the edge of the enhanced and slight. So overall, it's going to be a pretty large, widespread wind event, as well overall as well even a widespread tornado possibility for Wisconsin as well. But we have a very large moderate risk, including areas like Green Bay, Milwaukee, Kenosha, Racine, and Appleton. So big cities like Green Bay and Milwaukee are in the moderate risk. When was the last time Milwaukee was under a moderate risk or wind-driven moderate risk for a derecho? When was the last time? As well, Madison, Wisconsin is just to the south of this moderate risk. They're basically right near the edge. When was the last time Green Bay was in a wind-driven high risk? It was definitely quite a while. So, although it is derecho season, this setup is very good for July. As well, we do have to 4 million people in this this moderate risk, covering 35,000 square miles. Like I said, Milwaukee, Green Bay, all these areas city-wise are in Wisconsin for the moderate risk. Enhanced risk is basically double the population region now, basically 8 million people. Like I said, Chicago is basically right on the edge, but Chicago is in the enhanced risk. Madison, Wisconsin is in the enhanced risk. Grand Rapids, Minnesota is in the enhanced risk. South Bend, Indiana, and Waukegan, Illinois. So very large and well-known Midwestern cities are in these higher up risks. We obviously have Milwaukee, a very large city, not the capital, but a very large city in Wisconsin is in the moderate, and then we have a very large and possibly, basically Illinois' biggest city, Chicago, in the enhanced risk. Madison, or Wisconsin's capital, in the enhanced risk coast. So today is going to definitely be a pretty big concern, especially as it is going to be into a very populated area. And this enhanced risk goes as far as the very border of Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan. And the slight risk includes basically around 24 million people, obviously because we have a smaller slight in the Mid-Atlantic region, but we do have a slight risk for Detroit, Minneapolis, Toledo, and St. Paul, and that goes all the way down to areas like Fort Wayne as well. And then obviously very large marginal connecting these risks from the Mid-Atlantic to the Great Lakes. But let's now go ahead and look at the overall tornado threat. So like I did say, it is a 10% non-sig. I do believe 10 non-sig will most likely verify. I really don't necessarily see possibly 10 sig looking at a great probability for EF2 or EF5s within 25 miles at that point, because obviously a hatch risk, which is basically 10% or greater probability, is basically saying a very great probability within the EF2 or a range between EF2 and EF5 tornadoes within 25 miles from that point. And I really don't think that's going to be really widespread today necessarily, so I don't think there's really a need for adding a hatch for the 10%. But again, what do I know? Obviously, the SPC is definitely a lot smarter than me. But based on what I'm seeing, a lot of these will be obviously a very large wind-driven derecho with embedded elevated supercells. So not looking at surface-based supercells, which elevated will bring in more wind and as well large hail and some scattered a couple of tornadoes as well. But the 10% as well is including a lot of areas. However, thankfully the 2% or thankfully 10% will stay outside of those bigger cities like we mentioned. Like Milwaukee is kind of in that 5%, as well Green Bay. Green Bay is actually right on the edge of the 10% and actually 5%. So if you're in southern Green Bay, you are in the 10%, but if you're in downtown Green Bay, you are in the 5%. So I wouldn't rule out the possibility that 10% does get closer to Green Bay. But as you can see, even Minnesota is within that 10%. Although they're on the moderate, they do have a greater probability for tornadoes than a area in the moderate, such as Milwaukee. So again, the wind-driven threat's going to be very widespread, which is why that moderate kept extending. But the tornado threat will be a lot smaller and within a more, I guess, within that middle area of the moderate risk. That's what we'll be seeing in the very beginning when this derecho is first starting off as basically multi-cell storms, and then obviously getting larger and larger as new cells develop, causing a lot cooler of an atmosphere. That's when the derecho will start to kind of really pop off. But in the very beginning stage, kind of near northwestern and north central Wisconsin, even portions there of south or northwestern Minnesota, northeastern Minnesota. I'm going to really watch out for some supercells within those cells, those first developing cells within the really good atmosphere. And then obviously we have a very large, well, actually I forgot to mention 10% areas: Duluth, Minnesota, Appleton, Oshkosh, I believe, Eau Claire, and Fond du Lac. I really cannot pronounce French names, and they're Wisconsin, but there you get the rural portions of the states. 5% as well, pretty widespread, including basically 4.1 million people: Milwaukee, St. Paul, Madison, Green Bay, and Waukesha. So as you can see, a lot more bigger cities kind of in this 5%, including obviously the capital of Wisconsin, the capital of Minnesota, and then obviously other big city in Wisconsin, Green Bay, and Milwaukee. And then a very widespread 2%. Actually, there is no 2% for that slight risk or marginal. Sorry, for the Outer Banks and Mid-Atlantic, nor is there even a 5%. But a 2% is pretty widespread, including around 16 million people from the Canadian border to portions of Indiana. So overall, we're really watching out for some scattered couple weaker tornadoes there within this 2%. We can't rule out the possibility for some small overnight tornadoes near the eastern portion of Lake Michigan. Obviously, watching out for areas like Grand Rapids, Aurora, Rockford, Minneapolis, and Chicago. So now going to get a look here at the actual wind threat. A large 45% SIG, obviously, which is exactly why we have wind-driven moderate risk. So we do actually have a very large, significant, severe, not just including the 45, but much of the 30%. So actually, we have basically 12 million people within this significant severe risk, whether it's a 30% or 45%. So Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison, Grand Rapids, and Lansing are within that significant severe, but in the general 45%, we have about 4 million people, including Green Bay, Milwaukee, Racine, and Appleton. And obviously a pretty widespread 30%, including around 8 million people: Chicago, Madison, Grand Rapids, South Bend, Waukegan, and then even more widespread 15%. Hail has actually now been upgraded to a 30% SIG. Earlier today was actually 15% SIG, but it's about time that we do the 30% SIG, considering the amount of instability and how high how steep the lapse rates were. I definitely thought there should have been a 30% SIG, and there it is there, 30%. And that's going to be more towards, again, where you have that area of tornado threats. And that 10% located in north central and northwestern Wisconsin and areas near Duluth, Minnesota. That's exactly where we're seeing those steeper lapse rates before kind of those lapse rates significantly, cool off, or at least wind down as the derecho gets into its peak. So the significant severe risk includes around 1.4 million people, including Duluth, Eau Claire, Wausup, Superior, and Stevens Point. And the 30% in general, because we actually do have a few scattered areas that are the 15 that are in SIG. That's including portions of the far western mitten portion of Michigan there, portions of eastern Minnesota, and portions of northwest from north central Wisconsin are those areas within that 15% SIG. Overall, today's going to be really the main threat's going to be the winds for sure. Let's now look at the actual summary, though. There's going to obviously be there's a moderate risk for severe storms late this afternoon through tonight over much of Wisconsin. So potentially widespread severe events are expected late this afternoon through tonight along the corridor from northeastern Minnesota across Wisconsin into south and southwest lower Michigan. A very severe storms obviously likely across Virginia and North Carolina, but for the upper Midwest, obviously we're watching out for a very strong meridional flow which is associated with that strong trough, bringing in some really high amounts of bulk shear, as well as the really strong jet stream. One of these features currently over northern North Dakota, sorry, in that general region, and it's going to track southeastward into Minnesota late this afternoon. We're going to start seeing some more initiation and convection, obviously, by this afternoon. Right now, we're seeing some morning convection, but by the time we get towards the early afternoon hours, we're going to start seeing mixed layer Cape values about 1,500 to 2,500 joules per kilogram. And then we're seeing, obviously, effective shear values of 45 to 55 knots and large photographs. So if you're thinking about the 55 knots, how is that potential wind or high? Well, obviously, we're looking at Derecho season, not just a typical Dixie ice setup. And now, obviously, we're going to be seeing the primary severe concern is if storms congeal into a bowling complex, widespread and potentially significant wind damage will be possible. As well, most guys suggest the MCS will weaken late tonight as it moves into slightly less moist, unstable air, which will obviously be Minnesota and Indiana and Ohio, and even portion there of Iowa. However, if this mesoscale organization is sufficiently high, the complex could persist longer than the prediction. So obviously, exactly why that enhanced risk did push a little bit further south. So now let's get a look here at the overall long wave IR to get a look at where this morning convection is. Because obviously if you see too much morning convection the morning of an event, typically that means all the instability is basically being eaten up by the morning initiation. So if there's too much morning initiation, it could be a problem for the main event. But at this point, the morning convection initiation is rapidly dying off, and actually, even though there is still some morning convection, it's kind of to the south of that main area to really watch out. Obviously, we did see some pretty strong initiation and as well pop storms near the actual moderate risk, near portions of the western and eastern border there, Minnesota and Wisconsin. However, that convection didn't last really long. Necessarily long. However, even though there was still areas of high convection initiation within the main event area, we are soon to be seeing by the afternoon the environment will recover. We're going to be seeing a lot more instability, a lot more force. We're going to be seeing that wet and humid atmosphere as well. We're going to be seeing overall some really good amounts of instability within the atmosphere and overall troposphere as we get towards the middle afternoon hours, and that's going to allow for those multi-cell storms to start popping off. And obviously, as we get that nice outflow boundary, bringing in that nice gust boundary or gust front, we're going to start seeing that first development of the derecho. So let's now go ahead and get a look here at the actual reflectivity here on the future hours. So like I did say, there was some morning convection. You kind of see those storms right there near Minneapolis and St. Paul and the Twin Cities. However, again, that's not the main area we're watching out for, so we're not worrying about any initiation getting eaten up and have to wait for it to accumulate by the afternoon. Either way, though, we're going to be seeing a lot more force and initiation developing within that warm sector there near Wisconsin. So either way, the atmosphere and the overall conditions will recover either way. So there shouldn't be a problem with this storm just completely busting, because this will not bust at all. And then you kind of see some scattered storms within the next 7 or so hours. However, as we now get later into the next, let's say here in the afternoon hours, we're going to start seeing, or at least the evening hours, we're going to start seeing kind of those scattered, discrete, multi-cell storms coming to more bow-type structure, that bow echo, and that's indicating we are seeing that strong gust front as well overall nice, good shelf cloud developing there within the areas of Wisconsin. We're seeing like here up to, let's see, 61 decibels, 62 decibels. Let's go up here. Those higher 50s and lower 60s on decibels. So that's when we start seeing maybe some embedded supercells and watching out for some scattered tornadoes. A lot of instability there. But obviously, as it continues to go further down into a less favorable area with a lot less instability, we're going to be seeing a lot lower of a tornado threat and a lot more of really a wind threat. That's exactly why that hail and tornado threats mainly up here, because of all the instability and the amount of just a force. And obviously, we're going to be seeing just a lot less capping inversion here, so we don't have to worry about any air parcels kind of stalling within portions of the lower atmosphere overall. So it shouldn't be a problem up here. As we now go lower into the almost overnight hours, basically late at night, getting to the early morning hours, basically. Let's see here what actual time it is. It's going to be here. Yeah, this is 3Z, so getting into the late night, basically. At this point, getting into, let's see here, was it 10 or 11 o'clock Central Time? I'm really kind of get that that Z time there. But as you overall see, as we get into the late night hours, we're going to start seeing that Derecho and MCS kind of moving its way towards portion the north central and central Minnesota, or not Minnesota, sorry, Wisconsin, still seeing those lower 50s, actually getting up to as high 64 decibels. So we're going to be seeing some really high rainfall totals and actually some really fast rainfall rates, seeing 68 decibels there near areas just near Stevens Point and Appleton, that general region. But again, going to be seeing a really nice bow echo, nice gust front within this outflow boundary. So going to be seeing some really significant winds. We could definitely see Category 1 force winds within this. And obviously, as it goes into less favorable atmosphere, it will kind of rapidly fall apart, which is why we're not really seeing that big 10% or even hail threat for a portion of Milwaukee. And even though it's actually another reason why we're not seeing that moderate stretch further into Illinois, because even having that moderate near the border of Illinois is a little bit pushing it. However, again, this with the atmosphere possibly getting maybe for more favorable and possibly recovering better than what models and what just overall models are predicting. I guess that's why that moderate was pushed there that far south, because obviously the best instability right now is going to be near areas near Eau Claire, Duluth, in that general region. Let's get a look here at the actual 2-meter temperatures at this point. So right now we're sitting here in the upper 60s and even lower 70s at portions of the Minnesota region. Again, we're seeing a pretty significant heat wave. We do have excessive heat warnings and heat advisories basically spread out across the country from Dixie to the general region of the Midwest. So obviously we're not going to be seeing any main severe weather for the Dakotas, obviously, nor really portions of western Minnesota. However, by the next 8 or 9 hours, we get into the middle afternoon. We're going to be seeing some really, really warm temperatures there, up to 104, 105 degrees, near even 109 degrees actually for portions there of west central Minnesota. That's obviously way too, obviously, really much severe weather development whatsoever, obviously. However, pretty good atmospheric conditions and actually not too warm for a portion of Wisconsin. They're seeing some upper, actually even mid 80s there, 86, 85, 84, and then obviously we're going to get up to the near almost 100, so definitely going to be quite hot. But that's exactly why the main development will kind of be once we get after 0Z, because once we get past 0Z, then the temperatures will be very obviously we're going to be seeing the relative humidity obviously increasing as we get further overnight, and those temperatures will still kind of be very muggy and obviously still pretty warm, which is going to be really good grounds for a derecho. So obviously you're going to be seeing a better environment once we get in the overnight hours. However, with really warm temperatures obviously and still that increasing instability, that's going to allow for some multicellular storms to pop off before the main event. So let's actually get a better look here at the actual lifted index as well overall the dew points. So dew points are not going to be too bad at the moment. Obviously, we're seeing some upper 60s and as well even to the mid 70s there near portions of south central Minnesota. As we now get later into 17Z, kind of getting the early afternoon hours, now going to get dew points up to the mid 70s, 74, 75. 73 there degree dew point, so definitely really saturated area for sure. So we're gonna kind of stick around those possibly mid 80s and upper 80s with dew points in the upper 70s. So definitely not a bad atmosphere whatsoever for these first storms to start developing. A lot of instability. Look at the lifted index there at negative 9 degrees Celsius, negative 8 degrees Celsius. So we're definitely talking about for some pretty extreme instability, specifically for northwestern Wisconsin, which is exactly why I'm watching for that area to see its best supercells of the day for this event. When we get towards 20Z, that's when we start seeing the actual kind of bow echo within this linear mode start developing across northwestern, north central Wisconsin, but going to get dew points up to the higher 70s, 77, 78, so definitely really saturated within this region. Actually, if we actually look at the relative humidity itself for this region, relative humidity is going to be very high or actually quite high once we get to this time frame as well, looking at 90% relative humidity, 92, 87%, and for midday, that is not bad at all, considering midday this time of year. Typically, you see those maybe 50s and 60s with that type of heat, but we're still seeing a muggy and warm day, no matter how significant the heat wave is. That's actually why we're not seeing any severe weather for the Dakotas, because that's where they're getting the outbreak of the actual heat wave. But we're kind of seeing that kind of small cold front near the actual Great Lakes region, and that's why we're still seeing that high humidity, even though we're seeing upper 90s and even lower 100s within the region. So it's definitely quite a sign that we're seeing such high humidity no matter the heat, no matter the time of the day. But by 20Z, we're kind of lower a little bit, but still sticking in to 78% there, and 79% still sticking around portions of the upper 70s and lower 80s. And once we now get into around 02Z, then we get the derecho environment. That's when we get the prime time conditions. Not only we're still seeing those lower mid 80s, but we're not getting nearly 100% humidity. So definitely a great environment. However, as we go later into the Illinois region, it's going to go to more of an area of unstable air, basically a lot less unstable air. At that point, the air parcels won't be much warmer than the actual surrounding environment once we get towards that region, Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio. So let's now get a look at the actual surface-based CAPE here. So at the moment, obviously, we're not seeing much actual surface-based CAPE, kind of sticking at around 510 joules per kilogram. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of CIN, basically convective inhibition. We're seeing a lot of that right now at the moment in this region, obviously, because we're just not seeing the right environment. Obviously, it's the time you see a lot of CIN. It's exactly why you don't really see events starting up until really the late afternoon hours. And it's exactly what we're going to be seeing here within this event. So let's actually get now within the next, let's say here by 16Z, getting basically around noon or so, which is basically not far from now. Then we're going to start getting a little bit higher CAPE values and a lot less CAP values. So CAPE is going to be right at 1500, 1600 there near northwest Wisconsin, as well near far northwest Wisconsin. Going to get nearly 3,000 joules per kilogram. And actually, CAP will not be that bad. Look at that. Basically, 3,000 joules per kilogram there, and CIN going to be at negative 22 joules per kilogram. So we're definitely going to get a better environment once we get towards the afternoon hour. At this point, going to be seeing really a positive CAPE and negative lifted index. So overall, really good environment as well. Now going to get up to maybe 4,300 joules per kilogram by we get towards here 19Z, and that's where we start seeing those scattered multi-cellular storms kind of form from the discrete cells. That's exactly what we're going to be watching out there at this point. Negative 56 CAP, and even though we may see some areas over 100 negative CAP and CIN, we're going to be seeing a ton of forcing instability to the point where the air parcels can still rise no matter if it's over negative 100 CIN. So even though there's going to be stability in that lower surface, we're still going to be seeing enough force and instability to allow this air parcel to still rise at a positive beyond C. I really don't know, beyond C, something like that. So I really hope I did not pronounce that bad. But like I said, there's still areas of over negative 100. That's still 19Z is still pretty early on. Still obviously recovering from that morning convection. As we now get basically near 0Z, though, that's when we're really watching at the green environment, getting up to really over 4,000 joules per kilogram. Obviously, in some areas, nearly 5,000 joules per kilogram. So we're seeing some very, very strong CAPE. So obviously, we're going to be seeing these air parcels rise quite quickly. And obviously, this is going to prove that we will be seeing some pretty high ecotops within these storms. Possibly some very high ELs there. So definitely going to be very interesting setup today. So let's now get a look here at something we haven't really looked at in my past severe weather videos, but obviously I'm trying to learn a lot more about severe weather, so we're going to start seeing new things as I learn. So this one we're going to be looking at 2-meter Theta E, which is basically the temperature of a parcel, or the temperature of an air parcel, which it would have if it was lifted until it became fully saturated. So the higher the rate of the temperature, which I believe is in Kelvin, temperature-wise, not Celsius or Fahrenheit, the higher it is, basically, the more unstable the air is. So obviously, we're going to be looking at for those higher peaks, and boy, do we have those peaks. I mean, look at that, 374 degrees in Kelvin there. So obviously, really high temperatures by the time it's saturated. So obviously, we're going to be seeing a ton of unstable air. Specifically, like I did say, I've been seeing this whole time for northwestern Wisconsin. So we're going to be seeing a ton of unstable air, which is why we're watching out for obviously those higher, steeper, and more dry adiabatic lapse rates, which is obviously saying basically nearly, or actually no, it's not really going to be dry adiabatic, because dry adiabatic lapse rate is basically nearly 9 degrees Celsius. So we're basically going to be seeing kind of more kind of between the moist and dry adiabatic lapse rates, and that's obviously because of the high instability and forcing we are seeing that's going to continue. However, as we now get past 3Z and that main derecho event occurs, we're going to be seeing a lot less more instability, which is why that tornado probably will start rapidly dying down. Not going to be seeing a super duper big threat for overnight tornadoes, and as well, obviously that's why that hail threat, that 30% SIG, is kind of remaining towards that more rural area near Minnesota and northwestern Wisconsin. Let's now go look at the actual bulk shear forecast from the strong meridional flow here. It's kind of bringing in a lot of that shear, bulk shear, kind of from that nice trough, obviously associated with the jet stream. So we're gonna be seeing overall some really good amount of shear, like the SPC mentioned. Basically 45 to 55 knots is exactly where we're going to be really watching out for. It's actually 60 knots actually from the difference between 0 and 6 kilometers. So obviously we're going to be seeing a pretty big difference and actually a really big change in actually directional shear as we go higher up in the atmosphere. So we're going to be seeing a lot of spin, obviously leading up to a lot of overall vorticity within the atmosphere. So as we go to basically eventually near, let's see here, this is near 0Z actually, let's go towards 22Z, going to be seeing nearly 66 knots, 65 knots, and actually even a high 75 plus knots there across a portion of Green Bay, Wisconsin jet general region. Let's now get a look at the mid-level lapse rates here. So mid-level lapse rates really won't be necessarily too shabby. They're not going to be really high enough to be necessarily dry level or dry adiabatic lapse rates, but they're obviously not going to be really, I guess, low enough to be considered moist adiabatic lapse rates. So we're kind of sitting here right within the median here as we get to right around 12 hours or so by. Actually, let's get a little bit more into the afternoon hours where we see a little more favorable condition for that hail. Gonna get anywhere from 8.4 degrees Celsius there. Not too shabby really whatsoever. We go a little bit later now into, let's see here, the next 9 or actually, let's see, 12 hours or so, going to get around 8 degrees Celsius. So we're really not going to be seeing necessarily incredibly high lapse rates. However, really it's not going to be too shabby. I do think that 15 SIG would work best. I'm not really sure whether 30 SIG works necessarily the best for the actual hail. I think 15 SIG, a large 15 SIG would do the job. However, we can't rule out the possibility for this hail to definitely get its act together considering the amount of instability we're seeing, and obviously they're pretty good steep mid-level lapse rates. But definitely, it's definitely worth SIG worthy. And obviously those lapse rates dramatically kind of dropped really to really widespread 7.4, which is not, it's pretty low there. 7.5, 7.3. So obviously it's going to go to more less or a little bit more of a stable atmosphere there. Obviously you're going to be seeing just overall better conditions within that region. Obviously theta E temperatures will be a lot lower there. Let's now look at the EHI, basically the energy helicity index. And it's actually going to be quite high considering the northwestern region of Wisconsin at 5.5. So definitely watching out maybe for some strong supercells and even mainly elevated supercells. Again, we're going to be seeing that really large hail and possibly strong gusty winds. But again, we can't rule out the possibility for some tornadoes. Obviously not nearly a 5 there as well. And then going to get nearly almost a 6 on the EHI. So definitely watching out for some scattered tornadoes. I wouldn't say we're going to be seeing any strong or deadly tornadoes today. I think strong tornadoes is pushing it, but without a doubt, we're going to be watching out for some scattered and maybe a few tornadoes within northwestern and north central Wisconsin. Really watching out for this general region there for the EHIs where it's at its highest. And obviously that will continue to drop as we get towards the more unstable atmosphere once we get towards Milwaukee and northern Illinois. And then last but not least, now look at the storm relative helicity at 3 kilometers. And it's going to be quite high. So we're going to be seeing quite a lot of initiation, obviously a lot of helicity, and obviously a lot of instability. So overall, it's exactly why those EHA values were actually quite high, because the amount of SRH we're going to be seeing up to 539 meters squared per second square. So definitely really high SRH. So overall, we're going to be seeing as well a ton of vorticity, which is why I can very well see some spinning supercell, which we can't rule out the possibility for. But hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later.